What up, people? It's your boy, the Kryptonian Saiyan, bringing you a review for One Piece chapter 320 in Aokiji. Holy shit, I'm loving this dude right here, and if this is going to be the villain for this arc, which I highly doubt, but at this point I have to throw it out there, if he's going to be the villain, totally loving this. In fact, I would love it if I saw Luffy mix it up with more admirals, but based on what we saw in this chapter, more than likely Luffy's going to be severely outclassed, because what we see in this chapter is that Aokiji is no one to play with. And the thing about that is, we do know that this is definitely an indication that Luffy and others have to get stronger. I mean, this dude just turned the sea into a frozen continent, basically. So we know that the power scale is on a totally different level in comparison. When you look at what Enel did all of a sudden, hooking himself up to a generator and using the Kingdom Come, doesn't look that impressive now, because this dude just froze the sea. And I'm really interested. Somebody let me know down in the comment section if this has been clarified. But when Aokiji froze the sea, right? Did he actually go down to the bottom of the sea? Because if it did, he's super OP. Because one of the things a lot of people don't know is that when it comes to ice water, or when it just comes to sea period, it's cold, really cold up to a certain point, and then it actually gets warmer as you go deeper down the sea. Might have my biology mixed up. I could have swore that's what it was. After it got to a certain point, the temperature isn't as cold as it is near the surface. Still cold, but it's not as cold. So with that being said, the reason why I thought that that was interesting is if he did freeze such a large mass body like that, that far down, totally OP. And I like how when this chapter opens up, Oda immediately just moves away from the whole thing of, you're starting to remind me of your grandfather, Luffy. I like how that's thrown in there in the last chapter, and then he just discards it on this chapter and focuses more on Nico Robin. And all my suspicions have been confirmed, because as you guys know, I've been looking at Robin the last probably 100 or so chapters and going, why does she seem so distant? Why does Oda position her away from the crew? And then just in the last chapter, we finally see her, even though it's just faces, we finally see all of them all together in one panel. And again, they've been in panels before, but not necessarily space-wise close together. In that panel, we saw them all close together, and then she gets ripped apart. And now we see in this chapter the rugs further pulled out from underneath you, because Aokiji says the problem with Nico Robin is every organization she's been with has failed. And when that happens, Luffy automatically puts two and two together, and he basically says, I don't want to hear anything of this. And he tries to charge Aokiji, as do Sanji and Zoro. And what I found interesting on that is, if you compare Luffy's reaction to that, to where he's quick to stick up for Nico Robin, to when he first meets her when she's masquerading as Miss All Sunday, or going by that code name, when she gives the eternal pose to Vivi and says this will take you to an island that Baroque Works does not know about. If you look at that, Luffy goes, she's a bad guy, she's a good guy, she's a bad guy, she's a good guy. He's constantly flip-flopping, right? When he first meets Nico Robin, and then in this way it's kind of like a reintroduction, but in this case the symbolism or the parallels better, if you just parallel the situations, it's definitely showing that Luffy, even though she's got her, I would call them standoffish ways, passive-aggressive ways, not being completely inclusive with the crew, Luffy still acknowledges her as being a member of the crew. And it's very fitting that this is happening right after this last arc, which was meant to bring the crew closer together. So that was cool to see that. I like the little combo attack where we see Aokiji. So like I was saying, one of the things I thought was interesting was Aokiji basically tanks all of the attacks, all of them, and that was very cool to see, because what we see is Luffy tries the Gum Gum pistol, Aokiji tanks it, he blocks one of Zoro's swings with this ice sword, Sanji goes in for the kick, and Chopper's freaking out because he knows with how cold this dude's ice is, that if he doesn't tend to Luffy and the others right away, their limbs will rot off because of frostbite. So once again, we see Oda incorporating some real world stuff into this. So that was cool to see all of that. But what I thought was most interesting is the way he breaks down the bounties. Now, I know some of you guys have told me way back before don't use the bounties as a measurement to how strong somebody is. If they're really 100 million, nah, it's not really saying anything. Crocodile was at 80, and he's clearly over 80 million berries as far as his strength level. And I was just using that. And again, you can blame that on the whole Dragon Ball background, because numbers for a long time were really big, especially when you got into the Daizenshus. You could actually see it, and then they moved away from it. Gladly so, because if you look at what happened when Goku first got to the Frieza saga, and I'm connecting all this, just bear with me. When Goku first got on Namek during the Frieza saga, he had a power level of 60,000, and then when he went to go fight Frieza, less than a day later, he goes from 60,000 to 3 million. So he had a 33 times increase before you add in the 20 times Kaioken multiplier. So that just shows you that you can't really use numbers to determine strength levels in Shonen. And I like how Oda recognized what he was doing at this point and recognized some of the inconsistencies, because you kind of look at it and it's almost like, for somebody like me, when you're first reading it and you go, wow, Crocodile had 80 and Luffy's at 100, so clearly he's this much stronger than Crocodile. So I like how Oda just wrote an exit into that without actually making a retcon. So that was cool to see. And the way Aokiji explains it is, your bounty, part of the way it's determined is just your strength level, but also it's determined on how dangerous you are. And he says with Nico Robin, that's why she got a bounty that high when she was only 8 years old. It's because how dangerous she is. And we actually find out that Aokiji actually let her go at one point. And apparently Robin's done some really nasty stuff in the past, because of what happened is he says, I let her go. That was a mistake. And he goes in for the kill. And you got Luffy. He immediately tries to save her, and then when Robin tries to defend herself, Aokiji basically turns his whole body into ice, which is badass. Ends up getting broken apart. Chopper's like, oh my god, he's dead. And he reforms himself, and he actually encases Nico Robin into a shell of ice, and he says, she won't actually die. However, if you hit her, and he proceeds to rear back, and you can tell he's got every intention of hitting her. And that's when Luffy comes in, uses that stretch ability as he's rushing towards her, grabs the body, pulls it closer to him, does a barrel roll to prevent Robin's body from getting smashed. Usopp takes the body and runs off, and Luffy tells Chopper and Usopp to get her to safety. And you even get this scene where Nami tries to buy time herself, and she's got one of her, like the rods she puts together. She's got that. She's swinging it. And Aokiji says, get out of my way, girly. And you got this 3-on-1 fight to end the chapter off, where you got Sanji and Zoro and Luffy. They're staring at Aokiji, and Luffy says to back off, he's mine. And it's only appropriate because Luffy is the leader of the crew, so that is cool to see that. But I really feel like this could be Sanji now getting a bounty, because if Sanji does end up mixing it up, then Aokiji is an admiral, so that will get reported. And he's even said himself that he's seen plenty of pirates before, and he's seen plenty of powerful people, but what really scares him is that they've gotten really powerful very fast, which is something I agreed with. I mean, I said it before, Luffy, at the beginning of the series, there's no way in hell you could tell me Luffy could dodge sound and light, and yet he's dodging light almost at point blank range. So just seeing that huge increase is freaking crazy. Luffy's taking down people who can control the actual rain itself. So I mean, just different things. Like, they've gotten really powerful. I mean, Zoro took out a bunch of unnumbered Baroque Works members on his own, and he's shown feats of his own. I mean, Sanji and Zoro, even Usopp and others, they took out Baroque Works members and the numbered members. So very, very telling. And the fact that he knows this means that he's got more intel on what's happening, which is telling me that the Straw Hat crew, they are gaining recognition. Yet I find it very interesting that the world government still does not consider them to be a threat. And that's actually what I'm going to bring in my chapter question to you guys. They're not a threat simply for the reason that their crew is so small? And if that's the case, then what is the average size of a pirate crew on the Grand Line? What's the average size? Because I feel like with as much as they've done, they should be a threat. And I can understand the lack of intelligence when you got guys like this who have the intel on them. And unless Aokiji is the weakest of the three admirals, unless he's the weakest, there's no reason why they should not be taking this seriously. So, as always, guys, if you like anything I had to say, hit that like button as it really helps out the channel. Make sure to comment and subscribe if you're new. Thank you for watching, guys. Have an awesome day.